So a warm start to Saturday, some murkiness around northern and northeastern coasts first thing. I think much of that will retreat back to the beaches by Saturday late morning. And then the afternoon for the vast majority is looking sunny and once again very hot. High 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland, low 30s for much of England and Wales, and 35 or even 36 for central and southern parts of England as well as East Wales. So unusual temperatures for the UK. The heat by day and the lack of relief by night mean that for some people this can be a health issue and it can cause problems to infrastructure. So an extreme heat warning continues to be enforced through the weekend. Now overnight there will be some thunderstorms breaking out across northern England, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's the first signs of a change on the way. First though, on Sunday, for many places it's another very warm night, a warm start to the day, and then temperatures rise once again into the 30s for much of England, Wales, and another very warm day for southern and eastern Scotland. But northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland sees thunderstorms develop. Now these will be hit and miss. They'll occur more widely up and down the country on Monday, but where they do occur, the risk of flash flooding.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. A drought in England has been declared after its driest summer for 50 years, with the Environment Agency warning it could last into next year. The regions affected are southern, central, east and southwest England. Further, water companies could now enforce stricter measures to conserve supplies. Yorkshire Water is the latest to introduce a hosepipe ban. Environment Secretary George Eustace says it's not a big ask.
We're in a very strong position now, stronger position than we've ever been, to deal with these sorts of drought conditions. But as I said, it's still the hottest, driest July since 1935, the driest summer in 50 years. To have in some parts of the country a hosepipe ban is a relatively small sacrifice.
Indian-born British author Sir Salman Rushdie is still in surgery after being attacked on stage during an event in New York. The 75-year-old was about to deliver a lecture when he was stabbed in the neck and abdomen. He's faced several death threats over his writing, including a fatwa in 1989 over the publication of the Satanic Verses. New York State Police have named the suspect as 24-year-old Hadi Matar. He remains in custody. Members of the FBI who've searched Donald Trump's home in Florida have removed 11 sets of classified documents, some of them top secret. A federal judge approved a warrant to carry out a search on Mar-a-Lago. It's after the US government said it's possible the former president had violated the Espionage Act, a law that prohibits passing on or keeping national defense information. Earlier, Trump denied a Washington Post report that the FBI search was for materials related to nuclear weapons, calling it a hoax. The UK economy shrank by 0.1% between April and June. The Office for National Statistics says the phasing out of COVID spending is partly to blame. It's a big step down from the first 3 months of the year when GDP grew by 0.8%. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's admitted the current help for people struggling with the spiralling cost of living isn't enough. It's as the new price cap predicts the average family's annual energy bill could reach £5,300 by April. And rail passengers will face disruption again tomorrow as drivers at 9 train companies walk out over pay and conditions. West Coast services, LNER, London Overground and South Eastern will be affected, and some parts of the country will have no services at all. And the Communication Workers Union has announced post office workers will strike on the 26th, 27th and 30th of August in an escalating dispute over pay. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, let's get over to headliners.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight, in the company of 2 brilliant comedians, David Lewis making his glorious second return to Headliners, and Headliners legend, Nick Dixon. Shouldn't have said legend, that puts his wages up. Let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. And Faye, where shall we start? OK, let's have a look at the Daily Mail front page, and it's the most awful story, I'm afraid. And it's about this attack on Salman Rushdie. Rushdie stabbed up to 15 times. Sir Salman Rushdie was undergoing emergency surgery last night after being stabbed in the neck on stage in America. I'll get full reaction from Nick and David on that shortly. Next up, the Telegraph, Rushdie stabbed at literary festival. Also, drought officially declared in England after driest July since 1935. Blimey, 1976. Eat your heart out. The Guardian next, Rushdie stabbed on stage at event in New York. Author was attacked by masked man as he prepared to give a lecture. Flown by helicopter to hospital and attacker arrested. Also, The Guardian running with that drought story. Drought declared in many areas as crops start to fail. Water companies urged to introduce immediate hosepipe bans in England to protect agriculture. FT now, and debt payment and welfare bill set to soar. Servicing costs tipped to hit 95 billion. New Prime Minister faces a public finance crunch. Also, Rushdie stabbed. Satanic Verses author attacked 33 years after the fatwa. The Mirror next. Drought until the autumn, say the Daily Mirror. 21 million facing a hosepipe ban. And Rushdie stabbed, author attacked in US 33 years after Iran fatwa for writing the Satanic Verses. The Express have the same story. Salman Rushdie stabbed in frenzied attack on stage. They're claiming he was stabbed up to 15 times, although we're hearing on the news wires he was certainly stabbed once in the neck and once in the abdomen, but we'll bring you more as we get it. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Rushdie stabbed 10 times, say the Star, but they've also got levity because they are the Star. Unexpected good news as drought hits Britain. Nice beavers, say the Daily Star. As reservoirs and rivers run dry, boffins reveal the furry favourite that is the beaver could be the answer to our problems. Rivers which are home to magnificent beavers are less likely to dry up, according to the National Trust. And those are your front pages. And Nick, let's kick off with a story that we really don't want to be talking about. A great author attacked on stage in New York, Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, it's horrific. Salman Rushdie stabbed on stage at New York event in The Guardian, and we've just had the update that the alleged attacker is Hadi Matar, 24, from Fairview, New Jersey. So I was just talking to some younger colleagues about this, and they didn't really even know who Salman Rushdie was. But for us, it was like a huge thing growing up. We knew he'd had this fatwa in 1989 from Khomeini, and it got upped in 2012, the bounty money from $2.8 million to $3.3 million. And Rushdie used to have very extensive security. I don't know if he'd relaxed the security or what. It's horrific. And I do think, not that I'm saying it's a direct cause, but I do think that our culture has become very soft on two things, on free speech and on Islamic extremism. You know, the left particularly used to rally around Rushdie, and it was this liberal free speech cause, and you don't hear as much about that anymore. So I do think symbolically, this is where we are, that, you know, this could happen. Anyway, and also we had the David Ames stabbing recently.
David Ames, and then of course we have the Batley Grammar school teacher hounded out of his job, still in hiding. I believe he's got a wife and 4 kids. He's not able to be a teacher because he showed controversial materials to a class in a media studies lesson about religious tolerance, and this guy is still in fear of his life.
Yeah, and obviously Charlie Hebdo as well. So yeah, I don't know what more you can say.
I mean, I follow on. It's very, very shocking, regardless of any particular motive that may come out over the next few hours and days. And I agree with you, going back to when I was growing up. I don't know if you're the same age, but, you know, that was one of my first memories.
Nick looks a lot older than he actually is.
Does he?
Yeah, he's had a very hard life.
Like a 19-year-old?
Well, what it is, he's had a hard life, and 12 years of crystal meth aren't great for the health. But
take your word for it.
But yeah, you're similar. We're all a similar generation. We remember that story. I mean, I'll be honest with you.
How is this possible? And he was in hiding, and then he came out.
I didn't read the book because it looked boring, but the bottom line is it's important that these people can write these books because we have free speech in this country.
Well, yeah, and look, Midnight's Children won, what was it, the Book of the Bookers? There's no question, you know, clearly...
Not read that either, also looked boring.
An amazing, I know. We were talking about schools as well. Clearly we should have studied harder before we did this. An awful tragedy. Let's see, and look, I hope he makes a recovery, and brutal, really quite brutal.
Yes, indeed, and I wonder, David, whether this is sort of wider, and of course, you know, we cannot put 2 and 2 together and speculate about what may have happened. This could have been a random frenzied attack. It could be related to the satanic verses. But there is a wider theme touched on by Nick, which is protection of artists. You know, whether it's musicians... Look at how J.K. Rowling has been hounded by trans activists for pointing out basic facts of human biology. Now, admittedly, that what she said could be offensive to some, but she's entitled to say it. And yet she's had security because of those comments.
There's no, there's no fatwa on her, but I mean, what I find
unofficial fatwa,
I suppose in a way. I mean, what is so awful is that if this does turn out, and it really is, you know, only sort of conjecture, but if it does turn out to be causal from 33 years ago, it just seems particularly grim that it would take so long for it to happen from that moment. I mean, there is no way back from that time, even though the fatwa had been rescinded and you think he could live a relatively normal life. He was public, he had a wife that, you know, was around too. It's it's very, very grim.
Does it play on your mind? You're both brilliant comedians. When you go on stage, that what you say could get you in trouble. Did you feel the culture or the mood has changed a little bit?
Look, I mean, I think in terms of comedy, very differently than this, a very different act of violence, not comparable to this, to be clear, was at the Oscars when, you know, someone was attacked for saying something, you know, when Chris Rock was punched in the face. And I have seen a couple of things on the circuit since, which have been hairier, that wouldn't have existed before. So there is, I don't know if that's your experience, but...
I'm semi-retired from the live circuit, but I have been warned on this show, well, not on this show. My dad has very kindly said that I might want to be careful about some things I say. Some colleagues have said...
I think that ship has passed.
Yeah, I know. Some colleagues have advised me not to say certain things, but unfortunately I just have to go with my conscience. And if you believe in God, you know, I can't possibly go against my conscience and what I believe the truth is, so I'll never do that. So, but you do occasionally think, is it risky?
Let me reassure you, you are a baby-faced, handsome devil, Nick Dixon.
Thank you.
Just in case you decide to punish me for my last comments. Saturday's Telegraph now, and here's another sign of the end of times, Nick. This time, drought. It's all very biblical, isn't it?
I know, it's another unfortunate story, but, you know, not as bad as the last one, but it's still very bad. Supermarket rations bottled water as Yes, sorry, I read
That's
it.
bad news for middle-class people, isn't it?
Yes, basically, they've rationed bottled water as drought declared across half of England. And so, I mean, we've had plague in the form of COVID, we've had war, of course, now we've got drought. I'm just waiting for pestilence. When's that coming? And this is a bit like the whole...
Didn't we have that like a couple of years ago?
When was that?
Well, is that not another...
when those locusts landed on you. Anyway, it's saying 8 of England's 14 Environment Agency areas moved into drought status, and Aldi in Haringey, that's my borough, has put up signs telling customers they should only purchase 5 single water bottles each, while the limit for multi-packs was 3 per person. 3 multi-packs, still quite a lot of water. The thing is, I always used to drink tap water up north because we had clean water. You can't always trust the water in London, so you might want to drink bottled water. But yeah...
Cumbrian water, apart from Farmer's Wee, is actually very good,
It's incredible. It's got life-giving properties. It's like something out of Lord of the Rings. But now, yeah, so it's a bit like the toilet paper thing when everyone went mental about that. They're now going to go mental about water, which is a bit scary because it's water, although you can, for now, still get it out of your tap. The conspiratorial part of me, let's just throw it in there, thinks maybe this is them getting us used to rationing. You know, they want to get us used to meat tax, eat the bugs, no, don't have water next. But and I do sometimes wonder, lastly, in this country, what are we doing with all our water? I mean, I come from the lakes, which has the highest rainfall in England, but I sometimes think we've had a little bit of hot weather and all the water's just gone.
And we are an island.
I know.
This is true.
Where's all this water
I mean, if we're running out of trouble, I think that Africa's in trouble.
Imagine where else it would be. It does sort of make me nostalgic, this story, for the days of people buying 57 toilet rolls in the start of the first lockdown. I mean, how many can you eat, to be honest with you, is the question. But I just sort of want to go back to your original point, and I would say to you, please, while I'm here, don't slag off the middle classes, would you? So,
no, I know. I realise that was very triggering for you.
It was very
what are you and your people going to do without Evian and Perrier?
It's going to be... Well, I mean, from what I can understand, exactly... there are availabilities of the Italian version of Evian, which is very tasty, which the name
Pellegrino?
escapes me. Yes, very good. Very good indeed. That's
I just out-middle-classed you.
You've out-middle-classed me right there, so it's all good. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe this is sort of near to where I lived before, and people buying... But this is the problem with these stories, is that you start with it, you start just mentioning it, and then all of a sudden, you then have to go out and buy, 17 metric tons of water, or everyone else is going to buy it before you. So it's sort of... The joke then becomes serious, and then all of a sudden, you're washing yourself with 7-Up. Which is nobody needs.
Do you know what I think is very... If you run out of water, try Budweiser. It's a very similar consistency.
You think so?
Yeah.
Just a fizzy version.
A lot of hydration. Have you become mindful, David, of water since the country dried out a bit? Has it changed your habits at all?
It has a little bit. I have a small bit of grass outside of where I live, which is a long-winded way of saying garden, a tiny one. And I've stopped watering.
I thought you were boasting, I've got a small bit of grass. Listen, I know you're in the entertainment business.
I know.
It's actually an even bigger boast that he has a garden. I've never seen the like of that.
What's that, having a garden?
Having a garden, yeah, I don't have one. I'm not at your level.
When I say garden, the state of it now, it does look a bit sort of like the sort of scorched earth policy of sort of like the Sahara meets sort of, I don't know, the end times of Terminator 2. I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't look great. Stop watering it. It's gone feral. Let's see where we are.
So you're watering the garden less. Have you anything, either of you, in terms of, are you showering less or giving up brushing your teeth?
I was not really onto this until I saw this story, and I suddenly thought, I should have bought a load of water today, because now everyone's seen this story, it's going to be gone tomorrow. I bet when I go in Sainsbury's tomorrow, it's all gone. Yeah. Then I'll be aware of it, and then I don't know what I'm going to do.
I tell you what, I've stopped doing.
Showering's indulgent, by the way, so, I mean, I always have, so...
Yeah,
that's me.
The showering is one. I've stopped running the water whilst brushing my teeth, which I realise is the most insanely stupid thing you can do anyway, at the best of times.
OK.
We should be allowed to do that, though. And sort of, when you go to Europe and stuff, you don't do that, depending on the water quality in certain countries. But we should, as English people, be allowed to run the water, wastefully, I believe.
Mrs. Dolan has suggested that we stop flushing the toilet to save water. The problem is, her ablutions are... Full on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what she eats, but oh boy.
Is that the 11th plague?
And I'm sure she'll be happy you've raised that on national TV.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you. It lingers, let me tell you, it lingers. Now, Saturday's Independent next, and the UK's economic woes continue. By the way, I promise you we've got good news coming, but we are dealing with an attack on a great author. We've got the droughts, and the economy is is also in the toilet. Tell us more,
yes,
David.
The perfect segue from your wife's movements to the British economy. UK economy shrinks in second quarter, sharpening recession fears. This is in the Independent. United Kingdom's economy shrank in the 3 months to June. Figures released on Friday have shown in perhaps the least shocking news of 2022. GDP's fallen by 0.1% between April and June, and it was 0.8% growth the previous quarter. It's not looking great, let's be honest. This is the start of potentially a slippery slope. You know, I think we should all take all the work. It comes whilst we get it, to be honest with you. There's been some quite interesting quotes that have come out of it to pick apart, I think. This from the ONS Director of Economic Statistics. What a job that must be. Many retailers have had a tough quarter. Well done, Sherlock. These were partially offset by growth in hotels, bars, hairdressers and outdoor events across the quarter, partly as a result of the celebrations of the Platy Jubes. So the Queen celebrating 70 years on the crown has helped sustain the economy. Who knew that was a thing? Analysts are saying that it doesn't necessarily mean the start of a recession. Those people presumably are incredibly optimistic and see this very much as a half-full glass of water. But general consensus is we are heading into choppy waters. So buckle up.
But what we could just do is do what Biden's done and just change the definition of recession. You know, that's how they handle it. Recession used to mean, you know, 2 quarters of economic contraction in a row, but then they changed it in America. Like, no, there's all sorts of other definitions, man. And because even the Independent is saying it's often defined as that. That's what it used to be until... Sorry to just bring in my anti-Biden rhetoric.
Well, no, you're right. This is
what does he say?
Pure disinformation.
What does he say?
Well, they challenged... The White House challenged the idea America's in recession, even though they've had 2 quarters of negative growth, which has been the commonly accepted definition of a recession across the Western world for 50 years. But hey, different rules for old Joe Biden. Also, I think that Joe Biden back in the news saying that America has had 0 inflation for the last month. Did you see that?
I saw that because it was at 8.5 and hasn't grown again in the last month. So they said, we've got 0 inflation. Like, yes, if you change the measurement from a year to a month, amazing.
I would say that if you wanted to do stand-up comedy and you had only 2 periods, 2 quarters of economic loss, that wouldn't be bad.
That's a great year.
Just 2.
You're basically Michael McIntyre, aren't you?
Me,
look, if we can, let's power through a few more before the break. Saturday's Guardian brings us a story about the FBI and Donald Trump. So tell us more about this, Nick, because it's been big all week.
Yeah, FBI searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago home for classified nuclear weapons documents. This from The Guardian. And apparently they were looking for secret documents about nuclear weapons. The Washington Post has said this, so that's obviously trustworthy, lol. They've cited people familiar with the investigation as saying nuclear weapons documents were thought to be in the trove the FBI was hunting at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. And my friend said the other day he should have stuck the files from Hunter Biden's laptop in his house in Mar-a-Lago. Then they would discover them and maybe they'd be released. But anyway, Trump hit back on Truth Social. He says he's encouraging the release of documents. He says release the documents now. He's got nothing to hide. He pointed out Obama kept 33 million pages of documents, much of them classified. How many of them pertain to nuclear? Word is lots. So that's what Trump said. He said they could have it any time they wanted. So... We need to, I don't know what this nuclear fear is. The codes are changed every day in many cases. It takes something like, I think it's 42 separate operatives to actually set these things in motion. They think Trump's launching nukes from the golf course in Florida. But it's a very strange event. His lawyers were told to look at the walls. All the cameras were turned off. So it's all a bit dodgy. The Dems know they can't win on numbers anymore. They haven't got the numbers. They're losing key demographics. So... a cynic would say they're doing everything they can to shut Trump down ahead of the next election. And I just want to read out this tweet from Twitter. Twitter Safety saying, starting today, we'll begin enforcing the civic integrity policy in context of the US 2022 midterms. This means we'll take action against misleading claims about the voting process, misleading content intended to intimidate or dissuade people from participating in an election. I thought that was quite ironic because they're actually currently trying to intimidate and dissuade a former president from participating in an election. And that's my take on that. Nicely done. That's a slam dunk. Well, before the break, let's squeeze this one in. Saturday's Mirror. And with the Tory leadership race dragging on, Liz Truss continues to promise a war against woke Whitehall. David? Yes, I thought I might get this story. Liz Truss slammed for claiming, quote, woke civil service and quote again, strays into anti-Semitism. Liz Truss has sparked an angry backlash after claiming, quote, woke culture in the civil service strays into anti-Semitism. The claims were contained in a press release from her campaign in which
So I love to preempt the cringing, in which Miss Truss also praised, quote, Jewish values such as setting up your own business. Now, I would say to you that if you are trying to get my lot on board, stereotyping, saying they're very good at setting up businesses is not potentially the best way. I don't actually have a business. I am doing the open mic circuit. So by definition, does that make me a bad Jew?
Although don't forget you control all of the media. So,
clearly,
that's
why I'm here. Absolutely right. I'm dressing down because I don't want to stand out as someone who is clearly in control of it.
Could be considered quite, in its own right, quite offensive, actually.
Do you know what? Funnily enough, I think it is. And I think what I've been reading on Twitter today is that people are a bit confused by it because there's some Jewish people who've been working at the civil service saying, hang on a second, I don't know what she's talking about. I quite like working here and everyone seems very friendly and there's not a sniff of anti-Semitism at all. And then the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, I saw also on Twitter, was saying he was confused by it and it's completely bewildering. Hugo Rifkin too said the attack on woke culture was baffling and grim. But listen, we're going to be, well, who isn't going to be dragged into some sort of culture war? But Liz Truss, speaking at a Manchester synagogue, trying to get new voters, saying that you lot are good at setting up your businesses, that's why you should vote Conservative, is not perhaps the best way to do it.
No, it sounds to me like a very regrettable turn of phrase. Yes. And I think she really should have thought twice on that one. Well, coming up after the break is the cost of living affecting our gambling habits. Should Glasgow host Eurovision? And the blindness could be a thing of the past. I didn't see that one coming. See you shortly.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan, and you're watching Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight in the company of the hugely talented comedian David Lewis and the equally talented and devastatingly handsome Nick Dixon. Let's talk now about the NHS Saturday's Mail, and I'm afraid it looks like a strike, David. Tell me more.
Potentially, yes. Daily Mail tomorrow. Junior doctors in strike ballot threat over...
I thought you were swearing there.
Couldn't say it myself.
Hello, blind family show.
Acceptable 2% pay offer rise. Junior doctors will strike again unless the government hands them a bigger pay rise than they've been offered. So the BMA is calling for a rise of up to 26%. So I'm like, listen, I love the NHS. I do anything to protect it. But lads, 26%, that is something next level. This follows an unacceptable pay increase of just 2% for junior doctors. Now, as junior doctors' pay gets done, as you sort of go down through their hours, I've seen that you can, if you are sort of mid-level in a fast food restaurant, for the same amount of pay, you are paid the same as a junior doctor. The pay for junior doctors is pretty feeble. They're trying to get some more. They're just at loggerheads with the government. Presumably, they're not going to get any more than they're hoping for. And it sort of opened up some interesting sort of data about it. In a BMA, British Medical Association, survey of junior doctors, 83% said this year's 2% pay award was completely unacceptable. So they're going to be jumping in. 72% said they would be prepared to take industrial action if the government did not commit to full pay restoration. So I support them. It's sort of, you sort of wince to think what would happen if there was a sort of, do they just down tools in the middle of sort of, a colonoscopy or something like that and say, you know what, 12 p.m, we're off. Sorry.
Well, look, I hear you. I mean, my feeling about these wage demands is that NHS frontline workers deserve it.
100%.
I think the cops deserve it as well, 100%. By the way. They've had nothing for about 100%. A decade. We know that the courts have got the most shocking backlog, and therefore, actually, lawyers, solicitors, barristers, they could do with a bump as well. Everybody needs a pay rise. But the issue we've got is two things, isn't it? Inflation plus we've got a deficit. So at the moment, even day-to-day spending comes from borrowing. So what are you going to do?
100%. So 2%.
Do you borrow money to give people more money, which is then potentially inflationary?
Absolutely. Debt is huge, clearly. But a 2% pay rise is essentially akin to saying we want you to work for 10% less. If inflation is where it is over this year. So if you're getting a 2% pay rise, you're
what would you do? You're Prime Minister, never say never. You give them...
I probably would say never to that. Never say never,
6,
generally.
7%?
I think that there are people in society that you have to bend over backwards more than anyone else, or as much as anyone else.
He knows about people like that, but that's another story.
Absolutely. And
so you think there are categories of workers, like frontline NHS staff, who extra deserving?
I would say so, but maybe, a man who wears a lionfish T-shirt should not necessarily be asked for their opinion politically. But I would say, yes, there are some people in our society who you would throw a protective ring around, and junior doctors very much would be those people.
Now, although Nick Dixon is very, very, very well dressed, he's quite sartorially elegant, clothes horse of headliners. I must credit you for that shirt.
Thank you.
Was that a kind of Black Friday purchase, or what's the story?
No. I'm just very...
Bought it today.
Yeah, no,
You know what it screams to me? It screams TK Maxx.
And sadly, I don't know if I'm allowed to name brands on here, but I can't argue with you. It is, in fact, TK Maxx on Oxford Street. So thank you very much.
You can see he's still got the labelling at the back.
Yeah.
TK Maxx, the store where everything's on sale.
Because then you can still take it back. If you're smart, you keep the labelling, wear it for one headline, and take it back.
I took a punt. So. Every time I saw the show before, there was always someone in a very colourful shirt, and tonight you've both come as Paxton.
So
I've ruined
Leo,
it.
But yeah.
Too right. Brilliant stuff. We'll look at The Guardian next, and as we all feel the pinch due to the cost of living, it seems like some habits die hard, Nick.
Yeah, UK gambling firms' revenue falls, but cost of living crisis not deterring punters. So Paddy Power, Betfair, William Hill have reported a plunge in revenues, but they're blaming these safer gambling initiatives. There's these £10 limits on slot machines, and there's mandatory deposit limits for customers under 25. So it's actually not the cost of living crisis. In fact, people are still gambling, and it's quite sad in a way because it's a sort of desperate attempt to make some money in these hard times. And what you're going to do, you can't save unless interest rates go way up. Everything costs more, as we've discussed. So what are you going to do? You're going to take a punt and try and just, win a load of money.
Well,
and I've gambled briefly once, actually. I never gambled. Then one day I was ill. I had like a flu, and I heard a podcast, and someone was talking about gambling and how he made loads of money, and I thought I could do that. So I suddenly went online and started applying this gambling method called the martingale system. And suddenly I was up like thousands. I was up to like 80,000. I made like 6,000 profit in a few days. Then I started losing it all, and I went like, oh, this is gambling. And I got this terrible feeling in my stomach of fear and despair. And I realised this is gambling. And I still came out with a slight profit.
Okay.
But kids, I never gamble again because it doesn't work, ultimately.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to tell that story, but I was suddenly moved to tell it.
Full disclosure, I gamble every time I order fish at Nando's. Now, let's crack on with our next story. And Saturday's Express, the Scots want to relive their Eurovision glory, the years of Lulu, David. Now, you wouldn't even know who Lulu is.
They do. I absolutely do know who that is. Express, yes, you'll fill the arena with EU flags. Sturgeon sparks backlash after Glasgow Eurovision claims. So Nicola Sturgeon has sparked what's called a furious backlash, which is one of the Express's favourite quotes, I think. from anti-Scottish independence supporters after claiming the 2023 Eurovision contest should be held in Glasgow. So they are going for it, along with a number of other cities: Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Sheffield. London is not going to be in it. I don't know if you're a fan of Eurovision.
Well, I love Eurovision. I think London gets enough.
London probably...
I think share the love.
London probably does get enough. So it's not going to be here, but it's going to be one of those places. But Glasgow wants it. They just had COP26. They can clearly put on a very nice show if they need to, or host a lot of people from a lot of different countries. But Nicola Sturgeon clearly is a, it depends who you read, economically savvy or a Ramona, depending on who you listen to. But
the thing about her, right, is that, I mean, OK, I'll give you that she doesn't think that Brexit was a good idea, and she'll bring Scotland back into the EU should Scotland become independent. But the bottom line is that what we really know about this woman is that she's a great political operator, and she knows how to politicise anything, and she's just doing it again.
Perhaps. I mean, they would probably say
she's a wind-up merchant, isn't she? Don't you think?
Perhaps. I mean, they would...
Trolling.
I imagine they would say something similar about Boris at COP26 to play devil's advocate.
Oh,
but
sure.
I imagine that it was good. And some of the Twitter quotes coming in, I just think are exceptional. Simon, it doesn't matter his name. Yeah, Simon Wynn's his name. Raged on Twitter, and he tweeted, "So you can pack out the arena with EU flag-waving Ramonas and turn it into a political event. No thanks."
And can I just say, I checked his bio. He calls himself a centrist.
Wow.
So even the centrists are enraged.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, she's really touched everyone's buttons.
Do you think she's an astute economic analyst and a great stateswoman, or is she a wind-up merchant? Which is it?
I thought you were joking. Yeah, it's the latter, Mark. I mean, look, if they really want to leave Scotland, it's up to them. The weird thing is they want to still be in the EU. I find it all very strange. I think of myself as English, not British anyway, so I'm not that bothered. But I follow Liz Truss's advice. Ignore Nicola Sturgeon. The only thing I will add is they should have it in Glasgow if the Proclaimers are going to do the entry, because that would be amazing.
To be fair, I don't think we agree on your argument, but I would absolutely agree with that final point. If they could do it, and presumably the furthest...
was broken.
Yeah, this is
Stuff like
TV
that.
Gold. No, it's good. Well, I was just thinking that probably the furthest EU
I thought you were going to
countries-
join in, and we'd be like the Proclaimers.
It would have been very good. All I could think was that the furthest EU countries have come from about 500 miles, so that would be
nice.
useful for them. That's what I could
Nick Dixon, voice of an angel.
Thank you. I just need a second one of me, and us both to be Scottish.
Yeah.
Briefly, Liz Truss, she made headlines by saying that Nicola Sturgeon should just be ignored. Was that a smart thing to say? Was that top banter, or was it a little ham-fisted?
If you actually looked into it, Nicola Sturgeon has said a very similar thing about someone else a while ago, so it was very much the same level of discourse that Sturgeon had used, even though people were pretended to be outraged. So I think it was perfectly fine. But it's the kind of thing you say in a leadership contest when you're trying to win over the Tory members.
Is it like throwing them red meat?
It is. There's been a lot of red meat in this leadership. But let's see how much of it actually gets turned into actual state.
Rishi, by the way, he's turned into a bit of a vegan, hasn't he?
Is that right?
Yeah, well, at least metaphorically. I mean, is goose is cooked, isn't it, old Rishi Sunak?
You can tell it is, because the other day he said, I don't care if I lose, I'd rather do that than lying. So he's already defaulted to losing is the real win, guys.
Yeah. I think so. Does he get briefly, we must move on, but David and Nick, David, does Sunak get a job does he get an offer of a job in Liz Truss's cabinet, and does he take it?
That is a good question. It's sort of a bit Milibandy in a way, if you could argue. You know, he's done such a high-level job. Does he want to do it again? You know, when David Miliband didn't win in 2010, it was sort of that sort of similar ilk. I don't think he will take it. Look, he's been Chancellor. He'll just want to sit on the backbenches, bide his time, and, you know, there'll potentially be another leader in 2024. We'll have to see.
I mean, that's a really interesting point. If the Tories lose the next election, all bets are off. Yeah. But what do you think? Does he take a job in Truss's cabinet?
Well, I've heard people saying he might just go off to America and do some totally different role. I think he could potentially stay. I think everyone's saying, they've been so nasty to each other. It hasn't been that bad. I think he could potentially stay on.
I mean, no worse.
There's been no Republican
The only thing is, you wouldn't really make him a Chancellor again. You'd always be a little worried he was going to do what he did to Boris. If you were Liz Truss, you're thinking, will he give me the old knife? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. And he starts a new website, which is stillreadyforrishi.com.
Truss.
What about, like, Ready for Rishi, The Revenge? That would be the next one. So it could be good.
The only sequel that was better than the original. He hopes. Saturday's Times, which brings us to a story about the dangers of not background checking your football sponsorship. Nick.
Yeah, Barnsley cancelled shirt sponsorship deal with Hex.com over offensive tweets. So this was kind of the crypto world meeting the football world, and it was never going to go that well. I mean, so Richard Hart is the founder of Hex. He's a very interesting guy, and he's actually been unfairly attacked here, at least in his part of it, because people are calling it homophobic. But he actually did a tweet that was a critique of Saudi Arabia's policy towards gay people, and if you read the tweet, it very clearly was. So he's been complaining today, like, I've actually made a point that's pro-gay rights and I'm being attacked. Where it gets a bit more complicated is there are people who are thanked by Hex.com's Brent Morrissey for brokering the deal, and their tweets do seem to be worse, but I don't know how much they're involved because they only brokered the deal. So it may be overblown, but it seems to be. But they've cancelled it anyway because it's not worth the bad PR, and the edgy libertarian world of crypto, online edgy libertarian meeting the woke world of football, it's never going to go that well.
It wasn't going to go great, was it? Let's have a look now at this next story, which is a fascinating one, and it's in the Times. Last week's news said pigs could cure death. This week it's blindness. David.
Listen, that pigs could cure death is one hell of a headline, but this isn't too far behind. Cornea implants from pigs offer cure for blindness. Says the Times, I'm repeating it. I'm going to lead in with some stats here. An estimated 12.7 million people worldwide are blind because of damaged corneas, but only 1 in 70 patients receives a cornea transplant. Now, a pilot study, this implant made from collagen protein from the animal. Collagen, I was thinking that rings a bell, and that's the stuff that, you see a lot of people on reality TV with lips all puckered up. Is that right?
Yes,
I got the
that's
right
exactly
one.
Right. Collagen is used as a filler. What is collagen? Is it sort of cells or something?
I think that is what it is. Well, it's a bioengineered implant, I believe. Anyway, so they've used collagen protein from the animal and restored the vision to 20 people with diseased corneas. According to the study, the operations were free from complications. The tissues healed quickly, and with normal transplants, it takes several years. This was much, much quicker. So the future is here, and the future is porcine or porcine. I never know how it's pronounced.
Oh, there you go. That's
one of
question.
those. Porcine.
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 I think it probably is. Any ethical questions there for you, David, about stripping organs off animals?
I mean, I hope one day I'd never have to worry about this particular one. I mean, look, the reality is if people need corneas, if there's a way to farm them that's not too brutal, I mean, it's not for anyone who would ever eat meat to start having a particular moral quandary about something like this.
Yeah,
brutal.
I think you're right. Full disclosure: a friend of mine had corneal implants from a pig, and she's much better at finding truffles now. So I said, "How's it been? How's it been with the new eyes?" She said, "Oink oink," which I think is code for it's going really well, thanks.
I like how you doubled down on that joke.
I'm not letting it go. I don't go down without a fight.
Goodness.
I presented Balls of Steel, don't forget. Coming up after the break, and we have saved our best till last, thank God, otherwise we'd be in trouble. Non-binary monarchs, holier-than-thou vegans, and what testosterone really does to men. Well, basically, Nick Dixon. See you in 2.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight in the company of the highly talented comedian David Lewis, making his second of many appearances here on Headliners, and a very old friend of mine we've never got on, Nick Dixon.
How dare you? I thought we did.
It's basically a kind of, an acquaintance thing. It's like, hi Nick, like that. Do you know what I mean? Ships in the night. I did say ships.
Is that why I'm sat in the middle?
You are. You're playing Gooseberry. And you're going to do that with Prince Andrew now, because Saturday's Mirror is covering Prince Andrew, who I'd forgotten all about, Nick, but
no,
he's
still
back.
Around. He's back. Guess who's back? Well, it's Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew to keep taxpayer-funded police bodyguards after security review. So he's been stripped of his military affiliations and royal patronages, and yet we will still pay between £2 and £3 million a year to protect him. And it says here as well, with the exception of horse riding and frequently visiting the Queen, it's not known how he currently fills his time. Maybe we don't want to know. But I would say, in all seriousness, if he's been stripped of his titles, we're really just paying $3 million to protect some dodgy bloke. And I would seriously say, why don't we pay to protect people like Salman Rushdie instead? That would be a much better use of money.
Yeah, money well spent. I don't know. I can't imagine it's much fun rattling around the palace, but it sounds that this will be the fate for Prince Andrew for many years to come, David.
I don't know what he is supposed to do. He's lost, all his patronages back to the Queen. He can't... I mean, look, he even put that tweet out, or an Instagram message about his time as a fighter helicopter pilot in the Falklands on the 40th anniversary of the Falklands, and then deleted the Instagram post afterwards because people said you shouldn't comment on anything ever again. So that's sort of his life, is momentarily commenting on something and then deleting it immediately when there's some uproar somewhere on social media. So I don't know what you can do rattling around that big house, to be honest with you.
How do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? Yeah. Moving on now, and this is in the Telegraph, and it's actually related to the monarchy as well. David, tell me more.
Well, very loosely, let me say that to you. Telegraph has their dream story, I believe, today, and I am the one lucky enough to read it out, which is Elizabeth I may have been non-binary claims. Shakespeare's Globe. Academics working for the theatre have cast doubt on the gender identity of one of England's greatest queens. Now, remember, of course, that she is sort of the, I don't know how to put it, Chamberlain or Churchill, I suppose, more of her day. 1588, face of invasion. The Spanish are on their way. The Armada is coming up the Thames almost, and she says, I know I have the body, but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. Now...
actually Nick Dixon's catchphrase, isn't it?
I'll take your word for it. Is that what you're semi-retired?
Oh, I have the everything of a king.
She's now been presented in an essay by Shakespeare's Globe as it refers to her in the gender-neutral pronouns of they and them, which I thought was very interesting indeed. The essay defends Shakespeare's Globe's announcing the new... and it all comes off the back of, as well, Joan of Arc. There's a new play called I, Joan, in which Joan of Arc herself is presented as non-binary, also given the pronouns they, them. I think it sort of is a story that is absolutely, I don't know how to put it, hilarious or something a bit more serious than that. But I love the fact that you are given a different pronoun by the Telegraph, or at least the Telegraph will report it, just for saying that you are tough as bricks, to be honest with you, which is what she did. So
yeah.
Well,
I don't say good luck to her.
I mean, look, I think Nick's going to be against this.
Are you?
I don't know why.
I don't quite know what my position is. I haven't quite made up my mind. I think my position is just like, what a great story. There must have been, as they were writing that, as the paper was going to the stone, thinking, how can we get someone in a colourful shirt on headliners aggrieved? And
I have a lot to say on it. But I'm waiting for Mark to allow me to.
Well, do it. Sir Nick of Dixon.
Because I'm going to scorch the
Knock
whole...
yourself out. And you know what we're going to do now? David and I, we're going to go and get a coffee.
No, I mean, it's absurd. I mean, apparently the fact that Queen Elizabeth had the heart and stomach of a king is enough to make her non-binary. That's absurd. The essay says, from Dr. Kit Hyam, that while living and working among men, it may not just have felt like gender defiance, it may have had a profound impact on their sense of self. Well, the word may is doing an awful lot of work there to retroactively claim people are non-binary. It follows a Joan of Arc thing who wore trousers and went into battle, but also wore men's clothes partly to avoid rape in prison. And also there was a thing where they tried to make her wear men's clothes in prison because that would go against her agreement, which would mean she could be executed. So that doesn't make her non-binary either. And there's been attacks on this kind of thing from feminists, gender-critical feminists, etc., saying it's misogynist. I disagree with that. I think even though the outcome might be misogynist of these kinds of things, because you end up with biological men taking over from women, I don't think it actually is misogynist. I think it's the woke ideology moving through its hierarchy of oppression, just tearing through it. So you start off attacking men, especially straight white men, then you move to women, because after all, they could be straight and white and they're not gay. Then you move to gay people who are not trans. And that's what happens. So that's what I believe is happening. So that's why so-called women are being erased. It might end up misogynist, but I don't think that's the root cause. But yeah, sorry for taking that story very seriously. And David thought it was a light-hearted story.
So listen, it's fair enough. I think the bottom line for me was if I didn't wear this tonight, I was going to wear a ruff and codpiece. So this sort of speaks to my Elizabethan sense.
You had me at ruff and codpiece. David, before we move on, I think some females will be offended at the idea that, this great female figure of history like Joan of Arc or indeed Elizabeth I is now sort of cancelled as a female. So, oh no, women, you can't have Elizabeth I, you can't have Joan of Arc, I'm afraid, because they could have been gender neutral. I think a lot of women won't like this. They will feel cancelled. But what's next? Do we go back and say Emmeline Pankhurst, who's the woman who campaigned for female suffrage, she wasn't actually a woman either? Do you understand where some of these gender-critical feminists are coming from?
I do, and I dare say people, if they would like to be offended by it, are perfectly entitled to feel offended by it. But to my mind, I don't. I look at this story, and this is maybe the difference, is that I can't help but look at this story as if it's like a very, very early April Fool, to somehow weave together what potentially was a puff piece for Shakespeare's Globe, knowing full well that it would rattle some people and get them talking. I don't know, but
the Globe have been very proud of it. They put out these tweets saying we're using they/them pronouns for Joan of Arc.
100%.
People have done it. We're not the first. We won't be the last. They are the ones making a big thing about it, aren't they?
Although isn't that the point about theatre, though, that it's all fantasy, and therefore what they're doing is just playing around with genders? I mean, actually Joan of Arc has been gender neutral in the past, or even male. No. I think Joan of Arc was played by a man in the 1930s.
Yeah.
In the West End. But there you go. Look, that one will run and run. Of course it will. The Daily Mail next with a story about fat-shaming in our children's literature. Nick.
Yeah, visitors to Thomas the Tank Engine attraction told not to use the name the Fat Controller because it's a slur and call him Sir Topham Hatt instead, which is apparently his real name and is also quite amusing. This was a family day out at Watercress Line Railway in Hampshire, which took an unusual turn when a staff member requested that they refer to the Fat Controller by his real name. One father told the son, "We were talking about the Fat Controller when a staff member stepped in. In no uncertain terms, we were told no one could use such a slur." So, bit silly. This is the kind of thing people who don't watch GB News think we talk about all day, by the way, and we are addressing it here. But what I don't get is the Fat Controller is in control. It's body positivity. It's empowering. He's in control. It's even tied with the fat least fat. The Fat Controller. I mean, it's to me that's practically body positivity. So I don't see the issue. And of course, he's an icon, as it says here. He was iconic as a kid, and they're trying to take away the icon from us.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, David. I mean, he's the controller and he's fat. What's the problem?
I mean, probably what he eats, I imagine, and lack of exercise.
Very carby, yeah.
Lack of. I mean, if he's on train food the whole time, going up and down,
sandwiches,
eating
ciabatta,
toasted, cheese and ham, paninis, all the way up and down.
He's the boss, so you can just get them free. Just pick what he wants off the trolley.
Yeah, of course.
Hot chocolate, probably hot chocolate.
Full fat hot chocolate. No wonder he is. I mean, I just think of 80s cartoons I used to watch when I was growing up. It was him or He-Man, and they gave very, very different approaches of what masculinity was, to be honest with you.
Well, you've slid us, David, nicely into Disney and the Marvel universe.
I can assure you that was not deliberate, but I'll take it.
You're better than you realise.
No.
Which is not something I've ever suffered from.
But very good. Story in the Times. The Marvel film Thor: Love and Thunder banned, it says here, in Malaysia over potential LGBT content. The new film in the Marvel franchise will not be screened in cinemas in Malaysia, but may be available to stream on services outside the country. So what's happened is there was a gay scene, which is sort of a bit of a strange thing to say, but a scene in which the government objects constitutes a minor part of the film. In one of the scenes, Valkyrie, female character, briefly takes an interest in the concubine of Zeus. In another scene, Valkyrie and Korg have a short discussion about romance, where Korg explicitly says that he has two dads and that his species is conceived when two Cronan men hold hands over a lava pit. Are you following this?
I am, yeah. I'm ready for the song in a second.
This is how you have kids. So this has upset some elements, I imagine, in conservative places, wherever they choose to be. What I like about this story particularly, and props to this guy for coming on, the Malaysian Deputy Communications and Multimedia Minister, now that's a job, has come out and defended the position, saying that the film did not pass censorship, and he said the film touched on LGBT, but we see right now there are many films with LGBT elements that slip past the censorship, which I thought was a bit of a double entendre almost, but I don't sense that was deliberate.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fascinating story. Well, let's move on now to the Daily Mail. And Nick, I'm told you had a big gym session earlier, so you might be able to talk about this one in great detail.
I can't believe Richard told you that.
Have you got a pump going on at the moment?
Well, the problem is, I'm very strong at the moment. I'm also a touch overweight, so now I need to do that cutting phase again, and it's all very miserable and hard after 35.
I didn't think you
which I don't have to face because I'm only 28. What?
You look ripped to me.
No, I'm jacked, but I'm not ripped.
Oh, I see.
It's a difference. So this is how...
Sounds like you're about to be towed away.
I know, I'm just laughing at my own absurd description. So, I mean, this is how testosterone can make men more loving. Hormone promotes cuddling and not just aggression, study claims. So, basically, they injected testosterone into male gerbils just for a laugh at the weekend and found out how they behave with their partners. And it turned out it gave them more friendly behaviour and positive social interactions, and it influences oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, but they don't know why. But you see, the thing is, this is not surprising because testosterone improves mood in general. You know, there's been a war on testosterone. The Guardian have written articles against testosterone. People think it's just all about aggression, but actually it just improves mood. It reduces things like various illnesses. So it's just good for you in general. And it's good that they're testing on gerbils to find out more about it. It's just nice to have a positive testosterone story, and mine was tested recently, and yes, it was quite high.
Well, of course it was, obviously. We learn that every time you're on Headliners. Saturday's Telegraph next. Let's talk vegans, David.
Yes. Telegraph: restaurant scraps plant-based dishes after becoming fed up with, quote, holier-than-thou vegans. The Isle of Wight cafe defended itself against nasty and bullying vegans who were furious that their diet wasn't catered for. So this is a story about a cafe, an eatery somewhere in the Isle of Wight that has used to do vegan options, I believe, and then stopped doing them. And it's now come in for a lot of criticism. And they've gone out to say, having been called bullying and nasty for not serving up food, critics, that they've hit back saying, if you want vegan food, go to a vegan restaurant, which clearly has not gone down very well. They are calling those vegan people, some of them who are angry about them stopping doing vegan food, a militant minority that spoilt it for the majority. So I don't know. It's one of these stories where if you start trolling a restaurant online and the restaurant hits back and there's a spat, all of a sudden that does sort of become a good story. But who knew there were vegans on the Isle of Wight?
That is the really
I don't
big
say
story.
that in judgment, positively or negatively, but who knew? So if you want to get a good vegan food, I can tell you where not to go, as opposed to where to go, because they're not doing it.
It's funny though, David, briefly how we just decide we're divisive on everything, aren't we now? Even what you eat is tribal.
It is unbelievable, actually, to be honest with you. I have a diet which consists of all manner of things, and veganism is not something that I have... I mean, I eat vegan food every so often, right? Yeah. But I wouldn't ever say that me eating something is a political statement.
No,
anymore.
this is exactly
when
it.
I, tuck into a sandwich from a garage after a gig, I'm not necessarily, militant up the workers
You'll be
or
on
whatever.
the egg mayonnaise tonight, I've got no doubt.
Absolutely.
Courtesy of Shell and Jamie Oliver. Nick?
Oh, I was just going to say, the owner says if he went to a vegan restaurant and asked for a steak, he wouldn't get one, nor would he expect to. Seems very reasonable. My dad's a chef. While you're trying to accommodate people, especially if it's a medical reason, it's very frustrating, people coming in and wanting you to be a completely different restaurant from what you are, when there's plenty of options anyway.
I completely agree. Really briefly, only a few seconds, but sad news in Edinburgh Zoo.
Yeah, world's oldest...
No, it wasn't a visit from Nicola Sturgeon, by the way. Scared the animals.
World's oldest northern rockhopper penguin killed by fox at Edinburgh Zoo. This is Mrs. Woolowitz, a 35-year-old penguin, which was double the life expectancy you would expect. And the Edinburgh Zoo tweeted that
looks like Nicola Sturgeon.
Her massive... Oh, there you go, cool hair. Says her massive personality will be missed. Bit of an exaggeration, maybe. It's a penguin, but it is very sad.
There you go. A pair of foxes we've had tonight. The brilliant, marvellous Nick Dixon. David smashed it as well. Come back and see us soon. I'm doing Mark Dolan tonight, tomorrow from 9, and I'll be doing Headliners at 11. See you then.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no